In our final chapter, we're going to be looking at the idea of undoing racism and how we can facilitate change to create a more egalitarian society. Our text ends with a chapter that's designed to guide us through some of the steps that will help to undo racism and create a more just society. How does one dismantle a system of oppression that's been in existence for several hundred years? Undoing racism considers how to address the social, the economic, and the political embeddedness of white racism within the foundation of the U.S. political, social, and economic systems. Social justice promotes a society that's founded on equality and solidarity. Our institutions need to be treated as a work in progress. We cannot create a socially just society without addressing racism in the U.S. To do so, we need to discuss three key elements: vision of a just society, developing a deeper understanding of oppression, and appropriate strategic action. Oppression is not an easy concept to understand, and I think over the course of this semester you've gained a great deal of insight and also a certain amount of respect for how much there is to learn and understand about this topic. It's not just enough to understand oppression from just a racial perspective, but we must also understand it from a position of intersectionality that race, class, gender, and sexuality also impacts how oppression occurs. Undoing racism and creating a non-racist society needs a targeted approach that considers three different aspects of the social world. These include reconstructing government systems, conducting education and re-education, and engaging in social and personal activism. We cannot undo racism without changing the government institutions that have allowed it to exist and perpetuated it. We cannot undo racism without educating the public, and we cannot undo racism without engaged and personally invested public that takes action against it. It's important to recognize that allowing for a colorblind society is to allow racism to endure. We need to restructure government systems, and this begs the question of exactly how much dismantling needs to take place. We cannot interpret the Constitution and our framework of government under an originalist framework because we know that the Constitution was created to preserve a system of inequality between the races. At the same time, we cannot dismantle the Constitution. It simply cannot be done, as it's designed to be the highest law in the land. Education is also an essential component of a democratic society. Without an educated public, we cannot make intelligent decisions on how to recreate the social order. Students must understand social issues in depth and draw from the historical understanding of race relations by examining history, social policy, issues, and events. Students must also think about their own personal experiences in the area of race relations and consider what it means to be an active participant in society. Anti-racist democratic education is when racism is challenged rather than ignored. Being non-racist is not the answer, just as being colorblind is not the answer. We must seek to actively confront the racial dynamics in our social world, rather than simply state that there is no racism. It means that the privileged should examine their own realities and opportunities and understand them relative to other groups. However, there are strong opponents of anti-racist education. Some of the criticisms are that it distorts the issues and draws too much on the issue of race, rather than the systems of oppression that need to be examined and dismantled. Another criticism is that there is too strong a negative tone when one labels that the issue is anti-racism, because the word anti is too reactive to what is, rather than proactive in creating something else. Another criticism is that anti-racist education is too political, and that it is also disconnected from other forms of oppression. It should instead focus on shared goals rather than discussing separate group struggles. This line of criticism follows the framework of thinking that oppression is the issue, not racism. It considers racism as too narrow of a framework. Those that support anti-racism democratic education would say that we have to tackle the notion of colorblindness. The reality of our society is that we are racist, and we cannot hide from the negative effects of that, and we have to focus on the negative reality of society. We cannot hide in our classrooms from the nature of racism. To do so is a disservice to the students and to society as a whole. Students have to be given a forum for discussion. And while tackling racism and building a better society is political, it is also personal, and we all have a personal investment in the health of our social world. We need to understand oppression in all forms, including racial oppression, and to tackle racism, this social issue must be examined by students.